Cheong-san waited for someone to say something because he was getting tired of the stairs. So when did this happen? Asked Soo-hyuk, but he could tell it was a question everyone wanted an answer to, especially with the particular glare that was coming from Anjo. You know she killed Jae-young-soo, right? She asked rhetorically. He just tightly nodded and he could feel Na-Yeon tighter her hand on his own. There's food and water here, Cheong-san said, trying to break the pattern of stares. He could only guess what was on their minds. Food? Dae-soo shouted as he pushed some of the others aside, moving to stand in front of Cheong-san. Well, it seemed for Cheong-san at least his distraction had hoped, but the hopeful look in some of the other students' eyes was enough to ease his nerves. Yay, there's plenty of food and water in the back, even some blankets. Let me get them for you. As he turned and headed to the storage room with Na-Yeon beside him, her grip never having let go, he glanced at something. Soo-hyuk seemed be fretting over Namra, which was odd since she always seemed to brush him off before, but now the way she looked was odd. He went to the back room and started gathering some water bottles as Na-Yeon finally let go of his hand to pick up some energy bars and jerky. Na-Yeon, did you notice something weird with Namra and Soo-hyuk? She looked at him oddly. Either them be closer than usually, not much. He hummed in reply, stuck and thought something was definitely happening. Returning to the classroom and where the two had seated themselves was even more odd, on the far side of the classroom, and Soo-hyuk kept glancing around. Almost nervously. He knew now that something was up and it was bothering him. It could be minor or something major which made him uneasy. Na-Yeon went to hand out some of the food she could carry as Cheong-san handed out some water bottles almost mindlessly as he maintained his eyes on Soo-hyuk and Namra. When he was done with his final two, he made a beeline straight for them. Hey, you two, water? He said, handing one to Soo-hyuk. But as he went to give one to Namra, Soo-hyuk immediately went to grab it, causing him to pull away. Hey, what's the deal? It's only water, he said, shocked. He hadn't expected such a reaction from him. Just give me the water, I'll give it to her when she needs it. He pulled back further and looked up Namra. She was glancing away, making sure not to make eye contact, with her sleeves full up and her fists scrunched. Just give me the water, Soo-hyuk shouted more loudly than he wanted, drawing the attention of the others. Cheong-san didn't know what to do, but he had seen enough zombie movies to know something was up. What's going on? He asked, backing away toward the rest of the group. I'm thirsty, Namra said, barely under a whisper, but they both heard her. Soo-hyuk moved to take the water as Cheong-san backed up further. All his alarms were blaring at him. He saw Namra stand up and walk beside Soo-hyuk to him. My water, she said in that same cold tone. He didn't know why his body was telling him to run, but there was nothing there. He let out a huff as he reached out to hand her the bottle. That's when a lone drop of blood came down from her nose. Cheong-san froze and Soo-hyuk followed his eyes as he saw Namra. Are you okay? He shakily asked her as she stood still. It took a moment for the gears to turn as Cheong-san quickly started turning around, fully intending to his bat. But his shoulder was held by Soo-hyuk, who asked him coldly, what do you think you're doing? He broke off the hold, rushing for his weapon, and as he held it he was tackled onto the floor as Soo-hyuk started fighting for it. She's bit. We need to get rid of her now. He said the statement as he punched Soo-hyuk in the face, trying to break him off. Soo-hyuk retaliated with his own wave of punches as the two fought on the ground. Cheong-san knew he would not win this fight, especially against someone like Soo-hyuk, the school's star athlete, and him. A nobody that works at a chicken restaurant and reads comics with his best friend all the time. So he knew he had to make him see reason. We don't have much time, she's going to turn and bite everyone in her. But Soo-hyuk just shook his head. You're not listening. She was bit by Gwenom when we were escaping the broadcast room. Cheong-san was shocked. Was he really going to use that? Gwenom is dead. I saw zombies eat him back at the library. Now I know you're lying. Na-Yeon couldn't believe how Cheong-san was acting. He was acting like her back in the broadcast room, paranoid and scared. She knew the dangers that could come with that, so she had to intervene. Cheong-san, stop, she said, but it seemed to have fallen on deaf ears. Na-Yeon was just watching the two fight, angry with herself that she was the cause of it. I can leave, she said, which seemed to make the two stop fighting as Soo-hyuk turned to face her. You're not leaving. Cheong-san took the moment of distraction to sucker punch Soo-hyuk and kick him off, much to the shock of everyone. But he was quick to recover as he scrambled to stand up, grabbing a metal pole of his own, standing in front of Na-Yeon. If you want to get to her, you have to go through me. Anjo rushed to Soo-hyuk to check up on him, much to the surprise of Cheong-san, who thought she would at least help him or try to reason with him about why they should get rid of her before she turned. But as his eyes glanced over the group, they finally stopped on Na-Yeon. She looked at him with almost fear and disgust. Cheong-san didn't know why she was looking at him like that, but it didn't make the sting that it caused hurt any less. Na-Yeon knew why though, because this situation was giving her a massive sense of deja vu, as this was what had led up to the death of Jae-young-soo. She could see herself in his place and it almost made her sick and scared. I believe him, Anjo said, breaking their eye contact as his eyes settled back on Soo-hyuk and Na-Yeon, now with Anjo by his side. I don't think they would lie about this, she said, sure of herself. These two had proven themselves more than selfish bastards. At least Soo-hyuk had, and if he vouches for her, then I believe him. He wanted to shout out that she was being clouded by her feelings for him, but he rushed to make a declaration. Give her an hour and I promise she won't turn, he said, moving away from Anjo and going to stand beside Na-Yeon. And just to prove to you that I don't think she's a zombie, I'm going to do this, he said, and before he started to tie himself to Na-Yeon, she tried to pull herself away. What are you doing? You already proved your point, you can just wait there for me. But he just ignored her, pulling her hand back as he continued to tie the two of them together, whilst Anjo just looked on. That's for if they try to throw you out, then I'm coming with you, he said to her, looking at her with his resolve set. Cheong-san was about to dispute this but felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Na-Yeon. She had her head hung as she began to speak, giving his shoulder a small squeeze. Give them their hour. Cheong-san could hear the hurt in the statement, and then it all finally connected. The way he reacted immediately, rushing to try hurt Na-Yeon. The paranoia, the fear and anger. The broadcast room. He didn't even think about what he was doing as his body moved on its own to wrap his arms tightly around Na-Yeon. I'm sorry, he said, and he didn't know what he was even apologizing for, but he wasn't going to let that stop him. She hugged him back tightly, clutching with a fierce grip onto his clothes as he planted a kiss on her temple that left the room silent. The shudders that were going through her body began to fade as he rubbed her back. He turned with her still in his grasp as he looked at Soo-hyuk, who had an arm wrapped around Na-Yeon's shoulder. How could he have let his fear lead to this? To fighting his own friends because of what he thought things should be like. The only person that had hidden their bite was the coach and Anjo's best friend, but she had done that mostly because she wanted to keep Anjo calm, and he didn't want to know. As he felt the now familiar breath of Na-Yeon on his neck as she snuggled in deeper, he glanced over at Na-Yeon. So you say it was Gwenom, and he wasn't a zombie? She nodded her head. Yes, he was talking to us like normal. Laughing mostly, but looking for you. About what you did to his eye. I could see some bite marks on his sleeves. Cheong-san took a moment to process this information as he stroked Na-Yeon's hair. If what you're saying is true, then we have a big problem. Soo-hyuk looked at him confused. What do you mean? Because a day ago me and Gwenom fought and I kicked him into a horde of those things. and I watched them taking bites out of him. He held Na-Yeon a little tighter. That's impossible because he looked fine when he was talking to us. He did try to get Namra. He kept saying he was hungry. Namra had been listening closely. Do you think that means he's immune? She asked, and Cheong-san and Soo-hyuk locked eyes. Maybe. But he still did bite you, Cheong-san answered. Only then did the other part of the sentence settle. And what do you mean he was looking for me? He just seemed almost obsessed, but I dealt with him, Soo-hyuk said with some somberness to his voice. Don't feel. Cheong-san stopped. He didn't want to start thinking like that, especially now with how something had happened with Na-Yeon. If he hadn't felt anything, then he would have never came looking for her. What would have happened then? Would she have just hidden in the storage closet forever or gone out to meet a worse fate? He didn't want to think about it as he placed another kiss on her temple. Let's hope he's not a problem anymore. Okay, you can start your hour, Cheong-san said as the group proceeded to sit around and wait. It was fairly eventless for everyone, and before they knew it an hour had passed and Namra was still human. However, she was now looking at Cheong-san and Na-Yeon oddly. You okay? Soo-hyuk asked, snapping her from her thoughts about the two. I wanted to bite you, she said, which brought a look of fear to his face that he quickly masked as he held her cheek. But you didn't, and that's what matters, he said, turning to announce to the group that she was fine. The rest of the group was quick to apologize for throwing accusations and being panicked about the situation. After receiving a small push from the back from Na-Yeon, Cheong-san came last as he apologized first to her and then to Soo-hyuk. They needed each other and he would rather they be on good terms. Namra had proceeded to tell them about the want to bite Soo-hyuk, how he smelt like the most wonderful thing in the world and how she had managed to fight it, which led to the conclusion that Onjo made. That must mean you're Hambi. She had been confused till Onjo rushed to explain. Half human,